Thanks for joining our Oracle Digital Assistant webcast series. I'm Jürgen Kress, part of the Oracle Product Management team. Today's webcast is the first in a series to create better enterprise chatbots. The webcast is live and we will post an on-demand version at Oracle Video Hub. For details, please see the Oracle Digital Assistant newsletter. In today's presentation, Grant Ronald and Daniel Taxera will give us tips what makes a great digital assistant. Good afternoon, Grant.
Good afternoon, Jürgen. Thanks for everybody for joining.
So, Grant, what is an Oracle Digital Assistant?
Well, we're going to show you a couple of digital assistants that me and my team have been developing in partnership with some of our customers, but also some of the digital assistants we have deployed as production as well. So we'll share what the great experiences that we've tried to build into our digital assistants are.
Excellent, thanks. Good afternoon, Daniel.
Good afternoon, Jürgen.
Thanks for attending.
Thank you.
So customized bots can be developed with the Oracle Digital Assistant platform, or you can use pre-built bots based on SaaS skills and templates. For example, HR. There is a bot available for human capital management, which can be leveraged and extended. Objective of today's webcast is to provide you guidance to build better digital assistants. And we have an additional team member. It's Oracle Arti. Arti is a bot that answers your questions. And please take a look at bit.ly/ODA documentation. Some quick housekeeping. For questions, please use the Zoom Q&A tool, and we will answer them at the end of the webcast. You can also all the time use Arti for questions about the digital assistant. At the end of the Zoom conference, please complete the Zoom survey. We will post the recording and the slides at the Oracle Video Hub channel, and you can subscribe to the channel not to miss one of our future webcasts. This is a series of 6 different webcasts. We start today with what makes a great digital assistant. On September 20th, we will present NLP. On October 4th, we will talk about why are entities so important. October 25th, about best practices in conversations. November 8th, we will talk about Backend Integration, and November 22nd, we conclude about different channels. Please make sure that you register also for the upcoming events. With this short introduction, I would like to hand over to Grant. Grant, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jürgen, and thanks everybody for coming to this session. I appreciate your time, and really start at the very beginning of the journey in building and completing a successful digital assistant project. And as Jürgen said, from the 5 remaining sessions, we're going to go into talk about implementation details. Although we're not going into the deep depths of the code, we're talking about what makes good models, what makes good entity extraction, what makes good conversations. But right at the beginning, we want to answer this question and get it right: is what makes a great digital assistant? Because what we have seen, and I've been working with digital assistants for the past 7-8 years or so, is that the foundations, good solid foundations, are what gives you the platform in which to build this incredible conversation experience. So today's session, we'll go through a number of topics. I'll take control of the first couple. We'll do a little bit of demos. Daniel will be answering some Q&A. I'll switch over to him halfway so I can get a drink of coffee, and then I'll finish up and we'll show you some examples of real bots, digital assistants, albeit anonymized, where they have had some success and some questionable design decisions as well. So let's get started. So the very first thing I think it's worth establishing is the success of a digital assistant really is the intersection of 3 incredibly important aspects that we're going to talk about now. The first is, are you building something that's going to benefit the business? It's got to have a demonstrable value that it helps with your call center, your load with your users. It has to be in the conversational sweet spot. And something I often discuss with users or customers is, what do you want from a conversational assistant that you couldn't get from a web app? Very important question. And then, of course, good business benefit, great conversational use case, not implemented very well, will also be a disaster. So what we need to do is get all three things right. And we'll focus on business benefit and conversational sweet spot, a little bit about implementation today, and we'll go into the deeper details of implementation in our next sessions. So why conversational? What's so great about a conversational digital assistant? Well, a digital assistant or chatbot, or those of you using Alexa will have experience. The wonderful thing about it is there essentially is no interface. You say what you want. I want to book next Friday off. I want to check my order status. You don't have to navigate anywhere. You don't have to find the right web page. You don't have to say the right words. You just say what you want. And it's up to the business to try and work out and resolve your answer. So great for the users. How's it great for the business? Well, probably the most obvious use case we see is call center, supporting call centers. You can call it call center deflection, maybe a negative term, but the business can ride those peaks and troughs of busy times by letting an automated assistant deal with the questions that people are waiting 40 minutes on the call just to find out what's your returns policy, or where's my order, or are you open next Sunday, those kind of things as well. So there's a big benefit for both the customer and the business as well, if we can build a great conversational experience. And of course, the benefit of a conversational digital assistant, and I've put together here a couple of examples of the obvious one. The first is, FAQs. That could be inside your business, your intranet, or external. I know even in Oracle, what's the policy for getting a company mobile phone, or what's my spend limit when I travel? Can I expense a movie? Where do I expense? All these are simple questions that we can spend our days trying to navigate through, when wouldn't it be great if we can just ask and get the right answer? So FAQs, great use case. Even just having a simple high frequency transaction. So one of our biggest customers that we have is deployed a digital assistant on their public web page, which essentially is mainly one use case, which is where's my order? And that's what tens of thousands of users every day are trying to find out. And of course, the guy in the call center doesn't know any more about where your order is than the back-end system. So why not cut out that wait and just find the details directly? So those call center type questions, and also, even if you are still engaging with a human at a call center, it could be information gathering. The call center agent doesn't need to get your credit card details, name details, verify you're a member, or whatever it might be. That could be handled by the digital assistant and hand off to the agent. So there's lots of kind of nice use cases that we see available for digital assistants today. However, and I'm very pragmatic about this, even though my world is focusing on conversational AI, is if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. Not every business solution is a chatbot. And I think that's important to understand, because some of the failures I've seen are digital assistants which either give very little business value or are not really conversational. So for example, if I go into travel agents to book a holiday, could we do that conversationally? Yes, maybe we could, but it's pretty complex. There's a lot of back and forth. I don't really know where I want to go, somewhere hot. I want to look at brochures. I want to see options. I want to price it differently. I might spend a bit more if I'm willing to, if it's a great location, back and forward. Is that really the sweet spot for conversation? Similarly, like a tax return, very complex. And of course, there are also users who we find are very much kind of almost command line. They're not speaking conversations. They're almost just saying, hardwired commands to execute to view a report or anything like that. Those aren't always the best use cases for conversational assistants. It doesn't mean that we can't have a conversational assistant there supporting it. So whilst you're doing your tax return on a web style of application, it would be good to have an FAQ bot asking, what's my limit on charitable donations in this year? When is the tax year end? How do I calculate my interest? Whatever it might be, those would be incredibly valuable inside even a web application. Similarly with a family holiday, getting recommendations, asking what the weather's like, where's the rainy season, how much is a ski pass, those kind of things as well. Even for the professional users, they might decide to use voice rather than typing things as well. So sweet spots, most definitely, we've got to play to the sweet spot, but there often will be at some point a nice use case where we can bring conversational assistants into the mix. And I'm going to focus, this is probably the two best examples. As I said, where's my order? And we'll show you a very quick demo of something we've done for a customer, because it's very highly used, and it's something where the agent isn't necessarily providing a whole lot of extra value. As I say, you go through to a call center in a different country or continent, they have no idea where your parcel is any more than what they can see in the backend system. So why not let the digital assistant deal with that, and then let the agents deal with the escalations, when they cannot find the parcel, where the digital assistant can tell you, yeah, your parcel it's in the post office and going to be delivered tomorrow. These kind of things as well. The other nice thing, and Jürgen mentioned about Oracle have a number of pre-built skills, HCM being one of them. And, out of those, there are some good use cases, such as, might be booking vacation or something. Something that you might have to do often, which can be, distilled down to book next Friday off. Hey, Oracle, book me next Friday off. How quick would that be, rather than going to the website? And it's actually got some advantages conversationally, because if I say, I know I'm going on holiday on the 29th, so I want to go on holiday on the 29th of October for 7 days. Now, if I'm going to do that conversationally, then that will book, obviously taking amending for weekends, etc. But if I'm doing a web app, maybe I've got to find out, well, when's the last day? Only don't book off Friday or Saturday, Sunday, because they're vacation day, public holidays or weekends anyway. So conversation can be a lot quicker than the web apps. So business value, conversational sweet spot, but we've got to ensure that a use case, your great use cases are well implemented. And as I say, we're going to get into this in our later sessions, but some of the key things that I talk to customers about is, remember, you have made a choice to build a conversational assistant, not a web app. Therefore, let's embrace the wonderful things about conversation. So the first thing might be buttons. Now, I'm not against buttons. In fact, most of the bots we build will have buttons in it, but the button is not the primary form of navigation. The primary form of navigation should be get the user saying exactly what they want. So yeah, embrace conversations and embrace the characteristics of conversations. I think what's frustrating for me is seeing what I would call, dull bots that are just dull. No personality. They don't have any human traits. And when I talk about human traits, I'm thinking things about, invalid error. No one says invalid error to you as a human-to-human conversation. Invalid telephone number. You'd say, hey, I tried that phone number. It doesn't seem to be working for me. Or can you just check if this number is correct? We don't lock the users into repeating, if they're down a particular leg of a conversation, that they're forced to complete that conversation. If the user says, no, forget it, let's do something else, we should deal with that. We shouldn't have these repeating phrases, please enter, please enter, please enter, if you get things wrong. That, if the user hasn't got it right first time, simply repeating the same error message isn't going to help them. And all of this has to be designed. I suppose one of the biggest issues we see, or a issue we see, is that the words of the bot are often left to the developer. And I would say I hold up my hand as being a developer in part as well. That's not the job of a developer. The brand and the personality and how you deal with the repair path when things go wrong are things that have to be designed and not left to last minute to be put together. Next thing, that's incredibly important, is the bot or the digital assistant has to understand the user. And this is the biggest challenge, because language is very rich and very imprecise. And it's very easy for a request to be ambiguous. Can I return these shoes? Now, is that an imperative to say I want to kick off the process of returning these shoes, or is it asking, inquiring about your returns policy? Can I return these? Language is very imprecise, so we have to ensure that we have very well designed intents, which are your primary units of how the bot understands language. Those intents have to be designed well, they have to be trained well, and they have to be tested to prove that they work to a particular level and that the bot doesn't degrade in its language understanding as the bot evolves. And that's something that, again, Jürgen has talked about ARTI. We'll show you ARTI. One of the things that we have with ARTI is over 500,000 tests that we run on ARTI so that we can prove version 20 of ARTI is smarter than version 19. And if it's not smarter than version 19, then at least that's a business decision we make. But we have an insight into exactly how our NLP understands language. And the last point I kind of make here is the user should be in charge. The user shouldn't be forced to remember keywords. You know, please say help to see my help systems. You know, therefore, if the user says, I'm needing some guidance, it doesn't understand it. You know, help, guidance, you know, some supporting information, whatever it should be you ask, it should be understood. You shouldn't be have to remember keywords, force the user to do particular things, or force them down paths that they don't want to go into. Now, there's a little bit of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and this is where I think, well, we put our own reputation in the line, and we say, let's look at some of the bots that we've built just to see what we think are some good characteristics. And this is, you can try this out. We built ARTI as a digital assistant for a number of reasons. We wanted to push the platform to the limits. We wanted to test out our own understandings. We wanted to also demonstrate what a digital assistant could be and do. So on the documentation page, ARTI is essentially an FAQ digital assistant and can answer questions about digital assistant. So the first thing you'll hopefully see is a good practice. ARTI introduces himself. I'll say himself because we made a decision. We actually made a decision to buck the trend and not follow the style guide that Oracle has for tone of voice, purely because we wanted to have a little bit of fun. So ARTI's a robot and his voice reflects that. And this is something as a conscious decision. So ARTI's greetings, allow me to introduce myself, ARTI Digital Assistant, an indication of how to get help, and what can we do next? You know, so you can help digital assistant. So, you know, what is a digital assistant? And ARTI says, look, here's a couple of ways I can help you. Well, let's see the product basics. And again, this is talking about sweet spot. We didn't try to replace the documentation. We're working in harmony with the documentation. So ARTI can link into both the documentation and other sources of information, presentations, blog articles, these kind of things as well. We can also, you know, the conversational, you know, the way I'm speaking to you today is artificial in that I will speak for 30 minutes and no one else gets to interrupt me. That's not a real conversation. Real conversation is back and forward. So, you know, we keep answers short, kind of tweet length, these kind of things as well. But in terms of good practices, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, you know, how can you help users find and discover more and more information? And this is an example where ARTI will, when it knows there's more information or other answers which are, you know, related, well, we can also see these things. So having asked about what's a digital assistant, get an answer, I've also had a bunch of other articles about what a digital assistant does, its definition. I've got some testing, automated development tasks, extending skills, creating digital assistants from REST APIs, these kind of things as well. And I can say, cool. And ARTI responds in kind. Why is that important? Well, we want to embrace conversations, and people will say cool, and they will say thanks. And you'll notice that cool and thanks are actually meaning the same thing. It's a positive, but Artie gives a different response. We vary responses. It's a thing we do. Again, very natural language. Let me just show you another couple of things very quickly. What built-in channels do you have? Well, let's leave the typo in there. Again, Artie is most willing to facilitate your answer to question. Here's a list of built-in channels. Pick one of these and get more. Now you notice we always give them a way of jumping out. I don't have to press a button. I could just say exit or get me out of here or anything it would understand. But let me just do something a bit crazy. I'm going to type in sausage. Now here we said, I regret sausage is not a choice. I've understood. There are a number of out-of-the-box types. The message is different. It's given me something different this second time. And the third time, again, telling me it's not, we're doing one more attempt to get an answer. So we're not repeating, we're trying to guide the user on the best choice, even though I was being quite obtuse there. Let me do one more thing to show you here. I want to deploy my bot to Android or an iPad. Now, essentially, that is two questions. How to deploy my bot to Android or iPad. And you'll notice here it says, well, I can help you. One at a time would be better. And I've detected that iPad is actually iOS, so we can choose Android. Or let's see if it's a Samsung device. And it's understood, even though I've not picked one of those, I've actually said something which is related to this question, then it adds. So this is all important, that we are not driving the user down a particular conversation. They can always get out. It understands the variations of how users will speak rather than being precise as well. So that's one example. Another one I'll show you very quickly is this is one for a major retailer that I can't mention their name, but you can maybe guess who they are, is to add my wife to, and I show this one because this is a great example of a real good use case. It's has a number of FAQs. It's taking load off of call centers. I can ask about, membership details like that. I can do check my order status. And I can there find my orders. I can log in. We'll skip that for now. But it does tell me other things it can do. I can find a warehouse. So where is my local store? I am just outside Foster City. Okay, and I've got the details in Foster City. But it's something quite cool here is, can I fill my car with gas there? What's interesting there is contextually aware. Can I fill my car with gas there? Well, where's there? There is the thing we're talking about, Foster City. So it remembers conversations, but it has contextual awareness in many ways. It can say, what about the store in Daly City? El Camino Warehouse is the nearest to Daly City that has a gas station. So here we're changing context in that we've changed city, and it's understood we're still talking about gas. So contextual awareness. So these are what I would say is, good examples of digital assistants. Okay, so let's go on. Conversational interfaces are not a new concept to many, not enough for getting it right. So that was the good. Here's some of the bad and the ugly. Now, let's start off gently. Here's one reasonable. Hello, Rosanna Channing. I'm a payroll assistant. Show my pension contributions, and then I get a button to click on, and it's showing me employer paid benefits. Reasonable, absolutely reasonable. However, some things, do we need first name and last name? Is that a bit impersonal? Is this all it can do? Paycheck, bank, it doesn't say any more. Minor things like, I see lowercase p for paycheck, uppercase B for bank, little inconsistencies, minor. But then there's another thing. It didn't actually say if it's answered my question. I said, can you show my pension contributions? It didn't say your pension contributions are on your benefit details, click here. It's just said here's benefit details. It's not really answered my question, although the answer might be there in pressing the button. So it could be more precise in reflecting back it's understood and that this answer is the answer that we need. So not bad, minor, but let's get into some of the more challenging bots. In fairness, this one was under development when we reviewed it, but you'll see changing an appointment. I can help with rescheduling, but I need the reason, and misspelling. Please select a reason why you need to reschedule. My father's died of attending his funeral. Great, let's see when's available. Wonderful. This whole danger of thinking that you know exactly what you're saying, something incredibly positive, which is like great or wonderful to, is a point that you have to be very careful about. There's also some minor things about wording. I can help with rescheduling, but I need the reason. Why do you need the reason? You know, it's a bit demanding. Then please select a reason. Well, selecting usually means a choice. There's nothing to choose from. Maybe please tell me a reason, or if you could tell me a reason, you know, explaining why. So improvements to be made. This one, unfortunately, got a little bit worse in that, you know, if I didn't click a button, and I know on the web, it may be easy to click a button, but on a voice channel, we might say, okay, what appointment would I like? 10 o'clock, please. But it doesn't understand it. If I say noon or midday, it doesn't understand it because it's expecting the buttons to be pressed and only the buttons to be pressed. And of course, we're into this Groundhog Day of just repeating and not telling me why the choice I have made is not being accepted. So you haven't told me I'm likely to get it wrong again, or I'm just going to have to guess to try and get it right. No indication of help, no what we would call progressive disclosure, showing more and more information. This is what I call web mentality. So we've queried some information and it's saying you have 116 open tasks, showing 5 to 8, show more. Now, if I want to see the 114th task, does that mean I've got to tab through how many groups of 4, 25 different groups of 4? This is not a conversation. This is a web app in a small channel. And I would prompt I would drive the business to try and change this and say, look, if you're going to return lots of data, what the bot should say is, hey, I've got a lot of records, maybe you can narrow this down. When was the order made, or who was the customer, something like that. This is what I call lazy error handling. Show me my payslip for January 2024. Well, it's obvious why we cannot get the payslip for 2024. And the answer is I'm unable to find a payslip, but that's a bit generic. That's probably the same error message if the network was down and we couldn't connect to the back end. Why don't you tell me precisely, you know, I can't look up for payslips in the future. If you cannot connect to the back end, I'm having a problem connecting to my my systems, maybe you could try again later, something like that. Different error messages for different failures give the user a little bit more information about why and what they could do to fix it. In that case, it might have just been a typo. I meant to put in January 2022. Here's another example. Leading the user off a cliff. Do you need help with anything else? No, I'm fine. Sorry, didn't understand that. It didn't understand the user saying no. It only was waiting for it to answer, the user to ask another action, which I didn't, and it failed. So again, be careful what you lead the user to. And we used to actually, in the early days of Arty, notice this, where we'd implied a question in one of our answers, and that led the user to say things like no thanks, and we weren't prepared for no at that point. This is there's so much wrong about this one, and this actually is a real bot we looked at, although I've put in fake data here. Please enter a valued value, and it's simply repeating round the same thing. And then at the end, you've exceeded the number of tries, please try again. And that is genuinely an error message I saw in a bot. So I think that wins the trophy for the craziest error handling for a bot. It's just wrong in every possible way. This is one we found on the internet. it needed hello, but it didn't understand hi. Again, very basic. So it was maybe looking for a keyword to kick off the conversation. Well, you know, if you walked into a shop and you said hi, and the person didn't look up, wouldn't speak to you until you said hello, you'd think that was pretty rude. That's what the bot's doing there. This was one we found, how not to do error handling. I need help rescheduling a flight. The bot encountered an error. To continue to run the bot, please fix the bot source code. I think that's another award winner there as well. This is what I call button-based hell. It's okay at the beginning maybe to have a couple of buttons, but the problem with buttons are there's a number of problems. If you put some buttons, people will think that's all they can do. And so if what they can ask is not covered in the button, they kind of freeze. The second point is, at what point is too many buttons too much? Because every use case you add, are you going to add another button? Is it 5 buttons, 10 buttons, 20 buttons, 30 buttons? How many buttons do you have? It's not a conversation. So really, if you're going to have driving users with buttons, then maybe it should be a web app or something that you need rather than a conversational interface. Okay, so that's a quick outline. I'm going to pass over to Daniel now, who's going to talk you through the timeline of building a great conversational project. Daniel.
So the idea of this topic, the anatomy of a conversational AI project, in reality, I'm going to talk at two topics that complement each other. So one is, as Grant mentioned, the timeline, the end-to-end life cycle of a project. And the second part is the necessary roles and skills that help move the project forwards, and they sort of complement each other. So this is our take. What you see here is now our take on what the project timeline or the end-to-end life cycle should look like. Again, this is not carved in stone. You can pick up this, you can change it, customize it, adapt it to your own needs. But the bottom line here is that the activities you see listed here in these steps are activities that are fundamental in helping you raise the chances of delivering a successful chatbot. And this is based on the experience, right? So we work with a lot of customers, a lot of projects, a lot of partners, and these are the steps that will really help you out throughout the end-to-end delivery. And this is one of the things we see, it's very often, is that there's always this sort of push to jump straight to the implementation, right? A lot of times there's just a vague idea from the business side, or nothing very well defined, and there's this push to jump out to create a chatbot, connect to a backend, and just try to show something. And this happens more often than not. And this sort of fast pacing or fast tracking the implementation will definitely bring issues later down the road. And therefore we absolutely, and this is not only something particular to a conversational project, but in most of the projects, right? So absolutely starting with getting that, the fundamentals, the baseline, and that in this particular case are those first steps where simply by asking the business exactly what are the goals, why do you want to have a conversational assistant? You already most likely have a website or a mobile application or some sort of intranet. Doesn't that fit the goals you want to achieve? And why is a conversational assistant better for the case? And the most interesting thing is that the ability to answer these questions is quite very revealing about the need the business has for a digital assistant. And obviously there are those typical use cases. Each business will have one or the other, but things like reducing the business load or reducing the back office load, especially in customer service cases. Innovation, the need to expand to different channels, improving customer experience. So all of these things are very popular and very powerful use cases. And it's good to work out exactly the one, as Grant mentioned before, the sweet spot for the use case. Other times, and this also happens more often than not, the trigger, it's just, the CEO wants a chatbot, competitor has a chatbot, so he also wants a chatbot. That's also fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The bottom line here is that the business should really find that particular use case, that sweet spot use case that allows to establish goals and actually how to measure those goals, so that this can be the leading force pushing the project forward. Now, the second step we have here, and I've before I joined the product management team, I was doing pre-sales, working with a lot of partners as well as internally with Oracle. We're helping a lot of customers run a conversational design workshop, and this is sort of the gatekeeping before let's say an implementation starts. And what we did here, and this is really important, that proved to be very beneficial. This is a brainstorming session. You can have multiple sessions, and we bring business IT, bring IT, conversation designers, sometimes marketing team. A lot of times we also brought the architect from the implementation team to be involved as part of this brainstorming step. And usually the output of this will be the input for the implementation. Just to give you an idea of the kind of things we're doing in these workshops, we're defining use cases, right? Brainstorming use cases. We are assigning priority to the use cases. In reality, the business was doing that. We're just sort of guiding the workshop. Giving priority to the use cases, complexity of the use cases, the ones that have the most immediate benefit or the higher benefit. Example, the one that Grant was mentioning about ordering, where is my order? That's, high priority, low complexity, massive return, fast. So that's a clear use case that, obviously will be on the top of the list. So do these brainstorming sessions, get a couple of use cases. We'll work out things like the digital assistant persona. The chatbot needs to have a personality, needs to reflect the organization brand. If you're doing something for a bank, probably you have a more formal tone. If you're doing something for let's say a sports retail store, it will have a different tone. And these kind of things need to be, defined. At least the strategy and the vision needs to be defined. The same thing as for the user, the target persona. I know it's good to define, to identify who's the target of the assistant. Is it like, younger generation, older generation? All of that will have an impact on the way we build the assistant, the way it talks, the way it expresses. So all of those things will be output of these workshops that we're holding. Similarly, the conversation itself. How does the conversation flow? How do we go from hello until how can I help you, or see you next time? That kind of that was the kind of output on these workshops. And this was VMN. Everything was detailed, to very detailed at the end. This was sort of an iterative approach, and it was built upon on. And once the business was happy and say, okay, we are happy with this, that's where we started the implementation. And the benefit of having in these sessions an architect or an implementation lead meant that the output of these sessions will immediately feed to the implementation. And this was, we had situations where there was a gap here, and where the implementation team was not part of the workshop, and we saw a big difference for those implementations where they were part of the workshop, right? There's an easier transition. They were part of the whole process. They know exactly the use cases, and it makes a much better, smooth implementation. Now, once you cover these two steps, because these are the two steps that typically are a bit more hidden from, I would say, developers and the implementation team, but they are absolutely critical in order to secure the next steps. And the next steps are, building the NLP model. You have the use cases, and from the use cases, you can, can do a little design. Okay, do I need one skill? Do I need two skills? How many intents I need? And the way you go about this, I think our recommendation for intents is to have roughly 30, 40 utterances for intent to start development in a way that you can properly test the model and see how well the model resolves those utterances. And again, this is an iterative approach, right? So you're going to create your intents, you're going to test them out, and you might refactor going forward. You might have situations where you merge two intents. You may have situations where you need to split two intents. So this is all part of the process. And one very important thing, and this is a gap we see in most implementations, is that while you're doing this, you need to create a testing suite. So the platform or the platform allows you to create this suite, and you should create this. Typically, what we suggest is this 80-20 split, meaning that 80% of all the generated utterances should be sent to feed the model, and 20% should be used for the testing of the model. And the reason why this is important is because it allows you to establish a baseline of testing, meaning that the next change you do, whether you change the intents or you add new utterances, you are able to compare the testing results with the previous one. And you are able to say, you know what, this is behaving better or is behaving worse. Without that testing, it's just a guessing game at the end. You don't know, you cannot tell if the model is behaving better or worse. Okay, so again, this is an iterative approach. After that, after we have, and again, this doesn't necessarily need to be sequential, but logically, this is more from a logical point of view. You have a build of the conversation flow. Again, the output of the design workshop will be critical in the input for this step. So in this step is where we're going to actually create the conversation flow. How does the happy path look like? How does the unhappy path looks like? So what happens when there's an error? How should we cope with that? Now you're going to define the entity extraction strategy. There's a lot of things that, can straight out of the workshop, and the conversation designer, I'm going to talk about that role in a little bit, does play a critical, has a critical importance in the input for building the conversations. And again, how to cope with small talk, how to cope with swearing, what do we do if the user swears? So those things, as a big correlation between what we implement here and what was, the strategies agreed and decided in those workshops. Because otherwise, it's up to the developer to define those things, right? So we do want the business owner, and the conversation designers to really own those kind of decisions and strategies. Then, and again, the next step you see here is build backend integration. Again, this is from a logical sequence. It doesn't mean only now you can build this. Obviously, you can start working this before. But from a logical point of view, you don't really need backend data up until now, right? You can pretty much mock up any backend data and just build your conversations and LP model, no problem whatsoever. But obviously, the backend integration is sort of the last piece of the puzzle, where you get all the real data and sort of things start making sense. And on this note, there needs to be some considerations as well, right? Okay, what kind of APIs do we have? Do those APIs provide all the data that we want? How many calls do I need to do? 5 calls to get the data that I want? Or, if I just want to get the customer number and I get a payload with 5 megabytes, is that really fit for purpose? So that's sort of consideration that needs to happen there, whether the APIs are fit for purpose, or if you may need to commission new APIs to the integration team or to the application team in this case. So there's a lot of considerations there, obviously, not to mention the security and so on. But once you have this step, and as I mentioned, sort of last piece of the puzzle together, you sort of wrap it up in terms of the project implementation part. But we have here a user testing block. In reality, testing as a whole should be present everywhere, right? I mentioned already about the NLP testing. You can also have conversation flow testing, where you have tests for the conversations to ensure that the outcome is the same. And again, to provide you that baseline against which you can measure. Testing is all about measuring things. But this particular step here, user testing, is more about, think about it as an acceptance testing, right? You have business users, end users actually testing the chatbot. And there's more subjective things here, right? Like, what's the feeling that the user has while communicating with this assistant? Does this really fit the business need? Is the use case okay? There's more to it from a user acceptance test, and as I mentioned, some subjective things. All in all the outputs of these steps can be used to feed in an iterative way, right? So you obviously from the output of user testing, you will take considerations and potentially do another iteration until business is happy and ready to sign off. And that brings us to the last step, which is again not a unique thing on this type of projects, but definitely as higher importance on a conversational AI project, which is the go live, especially the care and feeding, right? Once you release a chatbot to the public, you need to be on top of it. You need to analyze how are the conversations going? Are they being completed? Are the users dropping the conversation halfway? If yes, what's the reason? Is there something that is, and we do need to be on top of it, understanding, for example, there's potentially new use cases. If the users keep asking about, what are the opening times of this store, and that's something that is not addressed, that's potentially something that needs to be fed into the model and released. So there's a lot of data, a lot of logs that needs to be analyzed and and taken into consideration. Luckily, ODA has ODA insights that provide business with a lot of information there. I'm not sure how am I doing on time.
We got about 8-10 minutes tops.
Okay,
for you.
That's fine, because the second part sort of builds on top of the first one. There's a little redundant topics there, so I might speed up a little bit. Okay, so we saw the end-to-end life cycle, and again, that's sort of the main topics one should pay attention to, and definitely should not neglect them if we really want to deploy a successful chatbot. Now, in order to go about those steps, we do need a particular set of skills or roles to help us go through. So what we have here is 8 skills or 8 roles, and this can be as fine-grained as one wants, but I think this represents quite well the types of activities that we need to push through during the project. The most important thing that I just want to bring out is that this does not mean that you need 8 persons to deliver a project. In reality, and in practice, most of these roles tend to be combined. The same person will most likely hold 1 or 2 or 3 hats sometimes. So definitely, it's just sort of a responsibility layout of the skills, but obviously it's not a representation of the number of people you may need. Now, let's look a little bit here more in detail. Business owner. So think about this person as the project manager, right? This person owns the project from the business side, is responsible to sign off on the use cases, the goals, how to measure success, right? So this person, unlike a typical project manager, this person will be involved in all the steps along the project lifecycle, and the input of the business owner will be very valuable in several steps. For example, the conversation designer, the person responsible for carving out the responses of the bots. That person works very closely with the business owner. Same thing for data manufacturing. So the crowdsourcing of data, generating those utterances. This is very important because most of the times we have implementation teams coming from outside the organization. And there's topics very specific, like if you are creating something for an insurance company or for a medical organization. Now, that domain is very specific. There's very specific terminology. And the business owner is sort of the champion for the domain, and is the one that sort of makes the bridge between the domain wording and all of that coming from their own business domain, and makes that bridge to the implementation team and also to the people responsible from gathering data and so on. So this person, again, project manager is going to be present across the entire project. Now, the second one is really important one. I feel, and again, I've been part on some projects, and I feel this is the role that is harder for organizations to fill the shoes on. I've been in projects, so this person should be responsible for, let's put it simply, by the wording of the chatbot. What the chatbot says, how it says, the tone, the persona, how to manage, error handling, the entire conversation. This person is the owner. I've been in projects where the company goes outside and hires a freelancer specialist in this role. I've been in other projects where the person assigned to this role comes from the marketing team, the team responsible for the company's branding. And yet other projects where the business owner sort of takes the shoes of the conversational designer. In all of these cases, the outcome was not the same. What I really would like to highlight is that this role should not be neglected, because it really shines through when you have someone that is trained for this particular role, and it knows how to actually match the sort of internal branding and persona, and sort of deliver that into the conversational digital assistant. And again, this person will be present in a lot of activities, helping out during conversational implementation, the conversational flows. You're going to be present in a lot of the steps in the project. Now, okay, data. So this data manufacturing model training. So let me just step back a little bit. When an implementation starts, we have sort of two approaches for gathering of the data. One is sort of the fast track, and we tell developers to manually create some utterances so that they can feed the model and start fast track development. The second part is this one, is the data manufacturing, which is the crowdsourcing or data sourcing of real data. This is when we ask the end users, the business users, for real life data. And obviously, this data is more accurate and more quality because it comes from real users. And we use this data on a later stage because it takes some time to gather this data, and that data comes on a later stage to actually feed to the model and to make the model better. And this does require someone that is sort of the gatekeeper to ensure the quality of the utterances, to ensure that the gathering of the data happens, creating of all those jobs, works in coordination with the business owner, and so on. Equally, very important role, because the reason why we're splitting these roles is because when we don't do this, the ODA developer ends up by having everything on his plate. We've seen projects where the ODA developer needs to create everything from the skills, the intents, the entities, the design flows. He needs to come up with utterances, to come up with the data manufacturing. He needs to come up to what will the bot say now. He's doing everything. And regardless of the amazing developers we've seen both on Oracle and also in partners, the reality is that it's too much for an ODA developer. And this ownership should be spread, and we should have business owners contributing, should have conversation designers contributing, and data manufacturing also contributing to take the loads from the ODA developers that in most of the cases, and I've seen this many, many times, are really, they have too much on their plates. And ideally, an ODA developer should focus on ODA platform, should focus on using the platform features and implementing best practices, things like, okay, let's use a composite bag. This is all the things we can do with the composite bag. Let's bring entity event handlers. Let's build custom components. These should be the kind of things that an ODA developer should be focusing on, ideally, and having as, sort of backup the business owner and the conversation designer sort of feeding that information into the ODA developer. Couple of more skills. again, so these next ones are a little bit redundant because I already mentioned this as a step. So these are obviously integration backend development. You need someone, might be from outside the ODA team, might be someone from the organization, the integration side of things that is able to step in and help out with integration. Similarly, the front-end development, what we see most of the times is someone from the internally from the company that is responsible for channels, whether it's the website or Teams or Slack. That person will collaborate with the ODA developer in things like channel-specific features on how to actually enable the chatbot in a particular channel. So that's that sort of collaboration. This is the most typical that we've seen around. And the last two is the same thing. The last two roles is testing. We covered testing as a step in the life cycle, and things we discussed there definitely need someone to actually own how to look at the testing and actually to ensure all of these steps are being taken care of. I'm running through a little bit because I don't want to go over time. And the last one is the current feeding. Again, this is something, and maybe we can talk towards the end once we finish how we're doing this for RT. I know there's a Q&A question on that. Maybe this is a good topic to explain what we are doing for RT in terms of kernel feeding, to give a little bit more insight into this. That's all on my side, Grant, so I'm passing it to you again.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Okay, so some great questions coming in the Q&A. Keep those coming in. Some of them will answer to the whole room afterwards. So Daniel touched on conversation design, and this is really a kind of new skill for a lot of people. And it's incredibly important because when all you have are words, then of course they've got to absolutely count. It's really important, the tone of voice, but also there's no ambiguity that you're guiding users, that they're going to be reading all the words and not having a huge amount of text to guide them. So what makes conversations? And again, we keep coming back to this, and I often mention this in discussions with customers about what would happen in a restaurant if you were asking this, or if you walked in a shop and this conversation happened, what would you think? And quite often that helps drive the understanding of what makes a good conversation. It is collaborative, there's a back and forth, there's a turn taking, there's a personality around it. It should be relevant, it should be concise, it should be embracing the I think called anthropomorphic, which is the kind of projecting human-like characteristics that in language that would be non-repeating, non-rigid. There should be contrition. The bot might say sorry, they may say something positive. Things like empathy and humor are a little bit of a dangerous area, as we showed earlier. You've got to know exactly what you're saying great or wonderful to, or cracking a joke around. So that has to be used in caution, but it can form part of your bot persona if that's what the brand requires. And little things like acknowledgement, and we'll show some examples of this, and comprehension, knowing that someone is understood. And there's phrases that you might, as you research or go into things like conversation design, concepts like what we call discourse markers, which are words that kind of grease the wheels of conversation. It's the okays or the firstly or the sures. These words can almost seem like fillers, but they do provide a little bit of context. When somebody says, firstly, can I ask you some blah, 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 you're getting a cue that they're going to be asking you a few things if they say first. And of course, if they say lastly, what is your name? Then of course, that's the last thing. So these discourse markers are giving you cues as well. So we want to ensure, and as Daniel's touched on, that we have somebody who is basically the champion for conversational excellence, whose job in this project is to say, why is this conversation better than having built a web app? How can we make the conversation better? What are the elements of conversation that we want to embrace? And a conversation designer might be looking at things like identifying the use cases, understanding the personas, designing the happy path, but also designing, and you can't always design every unhappy path, but at least strategizing what you do in the case of the user needing a repair path, or what we call the unhappy path, where they're not doing the things you expect. How do we deal with that? And that conversational designer will be writing maybe the responses and helping through the testing as well. And with conversation design, there is a bit of a balancing act here, because the human that you're dealing with, or the digital assistant is dealing with, is wonderfully imprecise. They may imply a meaning. You know, I can't find Daniel's phone number. You wouldn't expect the bot to say, "Oh, that's a shame." You'd expect the bot to say, "Ah, well, let me forget Daniel's phone number for you, even though I hadn't asked for it. I just said I couldn't find it, or I don't know it." There's an implication that you want to find it out. So there's the, you know, users are not always saying exactly what they want. They may jump around conversational context, ask a different question you might be expecting. And of course, that is slightly odds at the digital assistant, which is trying to be very precise. You're defining intents which are quite rigid, and you're expecting some very definitive guidance from the user. And so what the conversation designer is balancing up the two, that when the user is imprecise, how can the bot best deal with that kind of ambiguity or uncertainty? And quite often it's not fixed through technology. Often it's fixed by you know, designing the conversation in such a way that you can guide the user to the right places and the right happy path as well. Now, there is a question about persona, bot persona, and sometimes maybe we overplay the idea of a persona. Artie's got a very definitive persona, and we did this deliberately to have a bit of fun and emphasize what persona means. But you know, it doesn't have to be so obvious. It just might be a backstory that understands: is your bot going to be trying to be quite friendly? Is it quite official sounding? You know, is it trying to convey financial acumen through its tone of voice? All these are elements that you need to fill in and define, because if you don't, your developers or your users will project their own personalities onto there, and that might not be exactly what you want to achieve in the end. So define the type of personality you want your bot to have. Quite often that involves a backstory as well. But often when you're designing the conversations and you've said, hey, our bot's persona or backstory is a particular characteristics. It's a 26-year-old female. She's got one kid. She's married. She likes going to the gym, etc., etc. Now, why is that important? None of that's necessarily coming out in the bot. But when the bot gets something wrong, or you're trying to design for a difficult situation, you might say, well, how would Lucy or Holly or whoever the bot is, the persona is, how might she deal with this? What would she say? Would she be sympathetic? Would she be understanding? Would she be guiding you? What would she do? So it's all helping as a kind of mechanism to try and help you create a strong conversational experience. Now, we're going to go through a couple of examples of what we mean by conversational design and where we can use conversation design kind of techniques. So a really simple one: can I order pizza? Sure, let me sort that out for you. That looks a pretty good message. Nice. Implicit confirmation shows that the digital assistant is understood, and then we can prompt the users to what they need to do next as well. So again, it seems quite obvious stuff. It's the kind of thing we need to ensure that we're doing here. So sure, I'm happy to help you order a pizza. So that's our implicit confirmation. And we have a small personal size or a large family size. What would you like to order? So we've prompted, we've queued the user up that they know kind of what are the right things to ask for. So that's been good as well. We might introduce what we call a choice architecture. Make it easier. Click the button. Small personal, large family pizza. That could be useful as well if we choose. And then something we call the Jenga technique, and it's something we probably even need to do with our PowerPoint slides, is we put the information in and then we take out the information that we don't really need. So I'm confirming your order of one large pizza, blah, 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 blah. The user's not really going to read that. maybe, okay, your large pepperoni pizza will be with you at 7 o'clock. You can track your order here, link. Because the main thing the user needed was the confirmation, pepperoni pizza 7 o'clock. But if we need to track anything else, we can get that from somewhere else. So reducing down, making it more consumable. Other challenges, the conversation designer, dealing with ambiguity. I ordered a TV, DVD player, blah, 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 blah. I'm not sure this will work my soundbar. Can you confirm? So the question's actually, I want to check if this works my soundbar. And the bot says, sure, I can help you order a TV. That's not what it was, because it got the intent resolution wrong because the user was going on about an ordered TV, I suppose. How could we better deal with that? This is something we do with the Costco bot, because we found that people were giving their life story about losing a membership card. And quite often it was not always resolving to the right thing. So if somebody did say, I was moving house last week and I moved from Seattle to New York and my mother was not well, and I ordered a new fridge for her because she needed to keep medicine and blah, blah, blah. And then we get to the end and the bot's not really worked out what the heck anyone was asking. So what we can do is say, well, look, we can actually find multiple intents. Sure, I can help you. What thing specifically would you like to have help with as well? So that kind of dealing with ambiguity is a pretty neat trick to do. Language is imprecise. I wanted to expense a meal for $230 last night. Who was there? It was me and 2 others. Okay, I'm expensing a meal for 2 people. That's not what it said. But of course, the bot has seen the number 2, and those of you who built bots will know it's kind of extracted that entity 2, but it's not right. Now, how do we deal with that? That's a pretty tough problem to understand that was actually 3, not 2. Well, I would deal with this by the conversation designer being more explicit. Okay, can help you create an expense, including yourself. Can you tell me the number of people who were there? There were 3 of us. That's a bit more explicit in how you should reply. So again, not solving the problem through technology, but good conversational design. Contextual layers. Okay, if someone would you like to confirm that order? This is an interesting one here, is that inferred meaning. Would you like to confirm that order now was probably a yes or no it's expecting. But no, the user said, I want to pay with MasterCard. So there's an implied meaning here. If you're saying you want to pay with MasterCard, then it definitely is. I think you can assume they want to go ahead with the order. So again, thinking about how we can deal with that as well. Contextual awareness, I showed you, I think, in the Costco demo, that it remembers, because it would be frustrating if you say, when does the daily city open? A daily city store open, and then say, can I pick up my meds there? And the bot says, sure, what location? Well, it's the daily city one. We've just been talking about it. And the last thing is ensuring the persona shines through, or the reverse is make sure you've not got a terrible persona. You know, where's my order? Input order ID, invalid order ID, try again. This is just terrible experience, but it's something we see a lot. Really, it should be, sure, happy to check. What's the order number? Bingo, that's the one. Give me a few seconds and I'll check where the order is. Stand by, I'm on the case. That is all a much more engaging experience than invalid order ID, invalid order ID. So let's wind up with a couple of examples of smart strategies. And one of the key strategies is what we call dealing with a long tail problem. I mentioned that FAQs are a really good use case. And of course, Artie is an FAQ bot. So let's focus on Artie. Artie can answer about 350 questions, 350 intents. It can actually answer more than that, because what we do is deal with the long tail via search, rather than trying to find the 10,000 questions that you could possibly ask about digital assistant. And of course, there's always more than 10,000. We say, let's pick the 300 questions that are asked 90% of the time, and everything else will deal with search. That, you'll be amazed at how often we see bot solutions that haven't even thought of that. They're trying to deal with 10,000 questions. And of course, they do it badly because they could massively undertrain their model. So deal with the head of the problem and leave the long tail to something else like search, for example. And in fact, most bots that we build follow a very simple flow. They have intents that try to answer the question. If the intent fails, rather than saying, I'm sorry, I don't know, we drop through to usually what we call a knowledge search, which would be a specific search in a very specific domain. So for example, if you ask Artie a question that we don't have an intent for, Artie will search the doc and our blog articles and other articles to try and find out if it's an answer. If that fails, again, rather than responding with I don't know, the next option we can do is drop to a Google search. And one of the features we've trialed with Artie, because believe it or not, people ask Artie questions like, who's the president of the US? Now, what we can do there is we can drop through to a Google search and say, you know, current president of the US is Joe Biden. Or, as we've done with one of our medical bots, we actually check that the question is in the healthcare domain, and we do that using an Oracle AI service that gives us the topic of a user input. And if it's health, we'll do a Google search on it. If it's not health, we'll just say, look, I'm a health bot, I don't deal with these kind of questions. And then the last option is transfer to agent. So each of those steps is an intelligent way of getting information to the user before you get to the ultimate, I'm sorry, I didn't understand, please ask again, which is we want to try and avoid. And there's examples of how we've done this in Artie. You can play about with it. And I think somebody asked this question, you know, providing lots of information to users. As you see, we keep our answers kind of tweet length. We use this read more button to automatically collapse down longer answers. But if you need to see more, you can read more. We have embedded links that will bring you to context in the documentation. We will do parallel searches in the background to see that if we have other answers related to that question, we will dynamically render this more answers button. And if you click on that, we'll give you a carousel of related articles that we find through search, both internet search, knowledge search, and other intents that have reached a particular threshold. So that is a pretty smart strategy that Artie follows that nearly all FAQ bots, and I have posted a link in the FAQ or the Q&A section to a template that we have for this as well. Other things we do, you'll notice Artie randomizes responses. So if I say thank you, as I showed you, we get a different response each time. We have something called a logarithmic backoff. So you'll see Artie says, I'm most willing to facilitate an answer to your question, or happy to answer that question, whatever it might be. But it only does that a few times at the beginning. The longer you chat with Artie, the more succinct Artie gets. So you could imagine that in engaging with a bot in the beginning, we are a little bit more verbose, but as you speak to the bot, it actually goes a little bit more terse in its or shorter in its responses, because you're already knowing how to use it as well. Believe it or not, we actually add a delay to Artie. So when you start up Artie, it would normally come back with 3 bubbles in a few milliseconds to start off. But that's not natural. So we actually implement a delay. So when Artie comes back with responses with multiple bubbles, we actually put a short half-second delay in so that it looks like it's more natural as well. We also have things like contextual awareness. If I ask Artie a question about, can I build a bot in Spanish? And then I ask, do you have any tutorials? It will try to find tutorials on multilingual bots. But if I ask it about entities and then ask about tutorials, it will give me tutorials about entities. So that contextual awareness is pretty important as well. We also do some things like when there's a problem, if we have a very short input, we actually and it's unresolved, rather than saying we don't understand, we would actually specifically tell the user, look, we work better if you give longer kind of input, because quite often people will be using Artie like almost as a search and just typing in 1 or 2 words. I think I already showed things like auto disambiguation, progressive disclosures, where the bot is giving you more information the more you're stuck. Exit strategies, help strategies, unobtrusive feedback. dynamic AI menus, and I'll show you this very briefly as we go in here. So if I ask Artie, I think I showed you what built in. There we go. So again, we're going to do something wrong here, but it will deal with it and give us a little bit more information to choose. And it's getting out here. I need help. So we can ask Artie for help at any time and bring that back. And there was a question, and I'll show you this as well, about auto disambiguation, and I'll put this phrase in here. If I go back to Costco, here's an example where somebody said, ordered 4 tires, but they didn't all arrive, had a tire appointment scheduled, but now scheduling and timing is messed up, and I can't even find my receipt. There's not actually a question there. So I'm not even sure how a human would deal with that. But what the bot does is it says, well, look, I detect that there's actually a few different intents that could match this, and it'll put them, and this is what we call dynamic AI menu. So it will put you through to the tire service department, that you didn't receive an order, that you want to return a product, or something else. So these are these smart strategies that you can use to help guide the user to the right answer, so that I talked about, not being a fan of buttons. There'll be a time where buttons are reasonable, but these are dynamic and context aware. So they are dynamically generated based on the question that's asked to help guide the user. So these are all good, smart strategies to try and guide you to the right answer. So I think we've reached the end there, and I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions, and Jürgen, I think's maybe got some follow-up as well. So I'm going to pass off to Jürgen.
For resources which are available for customers, please visit our website. At the documentation, you find also labs and examples, and you can ask your questions, Artie. Today's webcast is live, and we will post a recording at Oracle Video Hub. And for collaboration, please visit Cloud Customer Connect. For partners, we offer a partner community where you receive a monthly newsletter and you get access to a dedicated website. As a partner, you can also attend one of our upcoming hands-on trainings. So let's come to the questions and answers.
So I'm going to jump in because Scott asked one early on, which is a good one. How do you manage your care and feeding of Artie? Good question. It's not always easy. Because there is an effort involved. So we use a combination of things. We use our insights dashboards to look at bots, how the bots performed, but we also take the output from the insights, which is basically a log of all the conversations, and we do a couple of things. We load it into a database. We then run a clustering algorithm on it to look at specific clusters of particularly the unresolved questions, the things that Artie couldn't answer, and based on the cluster we assign it to the skill owner. There's 21 different skills in Artie. We've got about 8 developers work part-time on Artie, just as a side project, and each developer will look at those utterances and to see whether they are relevant for their skill, whether the bot needs to be retrained or the skill needs to be retrained, or it's a new use case that's not yet covered and we should have that use case or not. So care and feeding of a bot is an effort, but that's the same for all platforms. And that question, sorry, follow up there, Scott, is a database export clustering publicly available? Not yet, but we're working on that at the moment.
Grant, there's a question from Kumar. What is a good success criteria? As you're well known within Oracle to have a validation of Oracle bots, that it's a good one. What is your success criteria for a good bot?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to answer that. The first is, what is a business measure? Is it deflection? Is it success rates in terms of some sort of kind of questionnaire to the users? That's down to the business to define. We also look at the success of how the bot's been built, and within my team we've built a center of excellence, and for Oracle partners and customers we will perform reviews on your implementation and we can guide you on your implementation. So if anyone is building on the Oracle platform and they want us to have a look at what they've built, we can absolutely do a review for that. We also build templates that you can reuse as well, should you want to. And that you'll see in the product, we're adding a bunch of features which will validate and check skill quality. So it will check for poor coding patterns, undertrained intents, overlapping intents, and give reports and these kind of things as well.
Excellent. Then we had a couple of times the question, what's the best way to enable this WhatsApp channel?
There's probably a deeper response to that, and time is short. So I did say, look, there's two things. You can use a provider like Twilio to integrate with WhatsApp. There's also new WhatsApp APIs, which I've not tried yet. I believe you can use those directly. So that's a quick answer for those couple of questions. Okay.
Then what kind of bots are available for Oracle SaaS solutions like ERP or HCM Cloud?
HCM is probably our most requested, most popular one at all, but there's a whole bunch. And I think if you go to our, I'll put the bit.ly in the chat, but we have a bit.ly link that goes to our ODA documentation page, and there is on the left-hand side a link to Oracle skills that will take you to all the Oracle skills that we produce.
Then there was a nice discussion on wireframes and how to sell a bot to an executive team.
Yeah, we use, well, here, let me say this. Designing a conversation using a flow diagram is really tough because there's so many different flows. So we try to, using the ODA platform, you're not having to define every single flow. What you can also do is define flows and then rules about how those flows are managed. So we don't have to scope out everything, but we do, and we have used Figma as a tool for defining some of the flows that we build. I'm not aware of any screenshots, but I might post something on Twitter. If you want to follow me, I'm GW Ronald on Twitter, but that's probably the best place. I'll post something.
Nice plug. Daniel, next question is for you from Kishore. Can you schedule also notifications in Oracle Digital Assistant?
Yeah, so as I was answering that one, so we have a new feature came out now on 2208, which is called events. So events allows for external events to trigger a response in the conversation. So that was sort of the short answer.
Okay. I'm going to jump in here as well because I see a really good question. We have a chatbots in most of the application. What makes the difference with Oracle and other application chatbots? I'm a technical guy here. I'm not here to sell ODA, but let's just say I think that Oracle integration with other Oracle systems like our B2C, which is basically call center, which was Oracle Right Now, our pre-packaged skills like HCM, because of course we have huge amounts of customers that are HCM customers that can now get an out-of-the-box HCM skill. So I think those are elements that are positive in the Oracle story. Platform for platform, we can always make a case of we've got these features, we get those features. I'd like to think that one of the things that we are particularly is important to us is because we're building and using so many of our own skills within Oracle and Oracle apps, which drives the platform. I think it's an important message as well. But also, it's what we support. And as I said, we've got a team who are dedicated to Oracle customers and partners within my team, part of the engineering organization, who will actually guide you on building bots, all best practices, which is really important as well. So I would like to say that, I guess I'm summarizing saying the benefit of the Oracle platform is bigger than just the cloud service itself, although we're pretty impressed with the stuff we can do there. No, I was just going to say, I think it was actually great questions there. What was interesting is I took about half a dozen of them while Daniel's speaking and put them into Artie, and Artie answered them all. So not everyone, because there's some deeper questions there, but use Artie both as a way of answering questions, but also as an example of what a digital assistant could do. And as I said, there's quite a lot we're doing with Artie in terms of showcasing the possibilities with bots, and also proving what we do. And what's nice is the FAQ template that is published on our blog is pretty much a stripped down version of Arty. So again, we're trying to give you this production quality framework to start from as well.
Great, thank you very much for attending today's webcast. If you have questions, you can reach out to Grant, Daniel, and myself. And don't forget to use Arty. Today's webcast was live. We recorded the session and we will post it on Oracle Video Hub, including the slides. The next session will take place September 20th, and we will talk about natural language processing. Grant, any kind of highlights you want to tease for the next session?
To me, this is the most exciting stuff, because understanding language is the heart and soul, or the brain really, of a digital assistant. And there's an expectation that AI is magic and just does everything. Well, we're going to take away the curtain and show you that it's not all magic. It's all down to just pretty good basic practices of design and data quality and process and training and testing. And if you get that right, that is the solid foundation for a really intelligent bot.
So make sure you join the session and you sign up for the whole series. Once you leave today's webinar, please complete the feedback survey, and we are looking forward to welcome you in September. Thank you very much for attending.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you coming along. I hope you can join the next sessions. As I said, I'll post some of these images and questions on the GW Ronald Twitter handle.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Daniel, for the excellent presentations.